Hi, I'm Ethan Wong, and today I'm here speaking with Alicia Ostriker.
Hi, everybody. I am Alicia Ostriker, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Sounds great. And just jumping straight into it, a very general question here. Why poetry? Kind of what is special to you about poetry, and why did you pursue it, I guess, so thoroughly?
Well, I'll start with the second question and then go back to the first. Why did I pursue poetry? I think I was probably destined or doomed to be a poet because my mother read me poetry as soon as I had ears, as soon as I was born, practically. She was reading Tennyson and Browning and Shakespeare in my little ears, so that sank in. She was an English major. She wrote poetry. I started writing poetry as soon as I could write. So, so I think I was doomed. That would make it sound negative, but on the other hand, I could say I was destined. And poetry means to me, it's like the only thing I can really do well. I was never cut out to be a business person or a warrior. Or there are lots of things I can't do, but I can do poetry. And to be a poet to me means trying to find language for the realities that are not necessarily on the surface.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. A lot of poetry is kind of, or I've noticed that this is true in your poetry, and I would like to believe that it's true in my poetry too, but a lot of it is you describe the outer world and you get really into that kind of imagery where you're really detailing what's happening in the outside world, but all of it kind of builds towards this underlying message or theme, which is kind of always there. And I guess in that sense, poetry is kind of you're wrapping yourself around an idea a lot of times, or at least in my experience, it has been that way, where you use your words and your images to wrap around this singular idea.
That's a very nice way of putting it, which I've never thought of, and I'll use it in the future. I think of the relation of poetry to reality, not so much. It can be wrapping around, especially if you're talking about sorrow or trauma. You can wrap your words around it, and that is a way of containing it so it doesn't overcome you. Something like that. I usually also, though, think of entering reality, or having reality enter you, and what's really the magic of the process has to do with turning experience into language. And I like to say that all poetry is translation, because what you experience is wordless. Something is happening here, but you don't know what it is, do you? And very, very often in my life, I have used poetry to understand what is happening when I don't know what is happening, and I'm perplexed and confused. What am I feeling? What is going on? And you have to take that wordless something that's inside you and translate it into language that hopefully when people read it or hear it will turn back into the feeling that it started with in the people who receive the poetry. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. I think
The unnameable, the inexpressible, the unsaid turning into language. And if it's the right language and the right cadences and music and rhythm and pauses, then it will turn back into the feeling for the people who read it. That's the gamble.
yeah, I mean, so much of what you said is thinking about it exactly how I kind of process and perceive it, the way I write and the way I read poetry, just trying to kind of decipher it into whatever that main idea or that main inexpressible thing is. And so you're definitely correct about that.
Okay. Well, that's great. And often I think of the process as going deeply inside yourself. And the deeper you go, the closer you are to the truth of it. And this is important because when I teach, very often I have to say right up front to my students, write what you're afraid to write. Kill the censor. And what is it you're afraid to write? Everybody censors themselves. Everybody, is thinking of something and then thinking, oh, better not say it, better not feel it, better not think it, better not let anyone know this is what is going on in my head. But whatever is unsaid, whatever is unsaid in you turns to poison and wants to be said. And the great poetry is when that trapdoor opens or when the pot boils over and the thing that wants to be said and you might be afraid to say comes into being. That's where great poetry comes from, because there's energy behind it.
Yeah.
Like poetry isn't wallpaper.
Yeah. And I guess that's why when you read good poetry, it always feels like it's organic. It always has that kind of very natural feeling, as if what's being expressed to you is just, yeah, that makes sense, kind of in that sense. I don't know what I'm trying to exactly say, but I think you know what I'm at least trying to go for.
I think I do. That it, when you are moved by a poem, it's because it fits, it works, it's something organic, as you say, and it should surprise you.
Yeah.
What you yourself write should surprise you. Frost said, no surprise for the writer, no surprise for the reader.
And kind of going off of all this kind of organic and inexpressible ideas discussion we've been having, something a little bit more grounded I found interesting to think about is when you write a line or you're looking over a line, maybe of your students' poetry work, what kind of, do you think, goes through your head where you're like, this is a good line or this is not necessarily a good line? Because that seems so complicated to me. It's just kind of like you feel it or you just, I don't
Hard.
know.
That's hard. Like, how do you know when a line is good? That's a mystery. But one thing I can say about it is that everyone who wants to be a poet is doing a lot of reading. You do a lot of reading. You do an enormous amount of reading. You do hours and hours, days and days, years and years of reading, and all of that becomes like your own encyclopedic knowledge of what appeals to you. And you don't have to spell it out or explain it. You can't explain why some things are meaningful to you, but you just accept that they are meaningful. And then in a sense, what you are writing, you're measuring against everything you've read. And you don't have to analyze it. You can't analyze it, but you can feel this is right or this is not quite right.
Yeah.
And it's at that level, it's intuitive.
That's
It means it can't be explained. But from your own experience of loving some of the poetry or a lot of the poetry you've read, you get a sense of what a whole poem should feel like.
it is hard to tell. I guess a lot of that, yes, just almost all these facets of poetry are just that kind of inexpressible, have that inexpressible aura about them.
And of course, there are plenty of skills that you can learn. You can learn meter. That's something learnable. And then you can play with it. You can learn, to use images.
Apologize.
More
Just
than
doing the pest control treatment. Okay.
Oh, sorry, there's someone in my room. Yeah, and I kind of wanted to go off of what you were talking about, which is kind of based off of your own work. How much would you say of it is autobiographical in some sense, as in it comes from your own life and experiences almost strictly?
Some is, some isn't. It's really, some is and some isn't, because I'm interested in myself, my life, and my feelings. Hold on a minute. Sweetie, it'll be over when it's over.
It's fine. I'm just telling you dinner is now ready and it'll just get cold.
Okay. I think I told you 6.
I misunderstood. I thought it was 5:45 and that you wanted to be
No,
3 by 6.
No.
But in any case, I'm just telling you it is
7:15 is when I'm meeting.
okay, so it was a misunderstanding. But
Okay.
in any case, it's ready.
Okay, doke. Sorry.
No problem.
Dinner is coming up.
And so that's interesting to me, because I'd assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, but then your autobiographical, the stuff that's like more autobiographical, naturally the inspiration comes from things that you experience in your life. But the things that aren't autobiographical, kind of where do they come from then?
they come from politics, religion, art, and a little bit from nature. I write more about, right now, lately, I've been writing more about the city. I live in New York. But politics and religion or spiritual quest, that's me caring about these things. And I think everyone should write about whatever is obsessing them.
Yeah, that's part of the organic thing, I think. Just if you write about something that you are really caring about, that really is like getting to you, whatever that means, it'll be organic when you write about it. And I think that's really important.
I think that's very important to write about, not just caring about, but obsessing about. Like you can't get rid of it. It's making you crazy. You have to write about it.
Yeah, I think that's totally true. And to kind of wrap things up, would you like to read a poem for us?
Well, I thought of a poem. It's a New York City poem, and it's my experience, but then in the end, it's not my experience. So that covers both, okay? And it's, the title is Biking to the George Washington Bridge. It sweeps away depression, and today you can't tell the heaped pin white cherry blossoms abloom along Riverside Drive from the clouds above. It is all kerfluffle, all moisture and light, and so into the wind I go. Past Riverside Church on the Fairway Market, past the water treatment plant, and in the dusky triangle below, a hulk of rusted railroad bed. A single hooded boy is shooting hoops. It's 10 minutes from here to the giant bridge. Men's engineering astride the sky, heroic, an animal roar of motors on it. The little red lighthouse at its foot, big brother befriending little brother in the famous children's story. 8 minutes back with the wind behind me, passing the boy there alone, shooting his hoops in the gloom. A neighborhood committee must have said that space should be used for something recreational. A mayor's aide must have said, okay. So they put up basketball and handball courts. And if it were a painting or a photo, you would call it American loneliness.
Thank you. That was great. And just before we completely wrap up, do you have any short bits of advice, like small pieces of advice for any aspiring poets?
Read a lot. Read a lot and be aware of what you love and be aware of what repels you. Be aware of what you dislike too, because and if you are able to understand why you love what you love, you'll learn more about it and about yourself. And if you can understand why you dislike what you dislike, you'll learn more about it and about yourself. So I think, a huge amount of reading is really important. And write a lot, write as much as you can and throw away a lot. and if something feels right the first time, say, thank you, God. And if it doesn't, then revise.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Ethan.